Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Ms. McCarthy. Thank you for being here. We're near the end. We're the low guys on the totem pole. I chair the subcommittee on oversight, and just in the short time that I have been here, we've asked numerous times for documents from your department and your office, and continually, as mentioned earlier, rarely get those. But I was informed as we were walking in that coincidentally, we did receive a bunch of documents just before your testimony here today. And you actually mentioned in one of your responses that you have produced 15,000 documents to the committee. If we could bring up slide 1. We appreciate that. But what I have right here is an illustration of just one page of 2,000 of these pages of document, which is incoherent garbage. It's garble. It makes no sense. And so I just want to bring this to your attention. This is 2,000 pages of the 15,000 that are just like this. Either this is insulting, that there's no respect for this committee, we're just going to send them documents, or it's a political statement. Let's shut these guys up and move on. But I'll move on from that now. I do want to talk about economic impact. Regulations that have an impact on the American economy greater than $100 million are deemed economically significant. And Executive Order 12866, which was imposed in 1993 by the Clinton administration, requires that agencies conduct a regulatory impact analysis in which costs and benefits of economically significant rules are analyzed, as well as an analysis of potentially effective and reasonably feasible alternatives for these rules. Now, yes or no, Administrator McCarthy, when the EPA sent the proposed Waters of the United States rule to the Office of Management and Budget for review in 2013, did the OMB deem the rule to be economically significant, meaning that it would have an economic impact of greater than $100 million? Yes or no?
I don't know the answer to that, sir, but give me a second. I can look it up.
Okay, so it's something as big as the waters of the U.S. We're unaware whether it would have an economic impact of over $100 million. That seems that that should be something that we would know right away.
Actually, so the challenge for us is that it has no direct impact on the economy. The costs come in when it's actually being implemented.
So did the OMB... This is a
rule that determines jurisdiction. It's not a rule that requires action.
Did the OMB determine whether it was economically significant when you first requested it? That's the question.
Know,
you don't
I'll
know.
have to get back to you.
If the EPA, if the OMB had indeed determined it was economic significant, would the EPA have conducted a regulatory impact analysis, which is required? Yes. Yes, you would have. Could we bring up slide number 1? I'd like to show you a series of emails that were produced to the committee by EPA regarding the proposed Waters of the United States rule and its classification by the OMB as being economically significant. In this slide, this email, the Office of General Counsel, lawyer Stephen Neugenboren, and Acting Deputy Director of the Office of Water, Dave Evans, discuss OMB's determination that the Waters of the United States rule is economically significant. David Evans writes, economic assessment identified indirect costs that are well above $100 million a year. I think EPA has claimed the indirect effects of a definitional rule should not be used to trigger the monetary threshold identifying economically significant policy actions. Jim Laity, who is at the OMB, seems to have decided otherwise. So it's clear that the OMB initially had determined that it is well above $100 million impact. So is it the EPA's belief that if a rule has indirect economic impacts of $100 million or more, it should not be deemed economically significant?
You should not be surprised that we often have back and forth with OMB. I would not consider that to be a determinative.
Okay, if we could go to the next slide. In this email, the EPA Office of Water employee Jim Pendergrass writes, Nancy, who's Nancy Stoner, and Kim Kapakis, know that a regulatory impact analysis may be necessary. But there are some economically significant rules from EPA that haven't had an RIA, which is required according to the executive order we cited earlier. But he's stating here that there are some economically significant rules from EPA that haven't had an RIA. They are checking with the Office of Policy to see if there was some agreement at the political level that we don't have to conduct an RIA that is required by law. The response to this email states, "Good news. Tamika and Sandy talked to Ken, and Ken has said that it has been agreed we do not need an RIA. Let's leave it at that." So there was a political decision made that you don't need to do what law says that you have to do. So this email appears to show EPA made a political decision not to conduct a formal
Maybe the way
regulatory
you're reading
impact
it, I don't
analysis
think
for the
that's what
proposed
it
waters of the United States. Who made that decision? Who made the political decision that you don't have to follow what the law says you have to follow? Did that come
We'll
from
have
the
to
White
take
House?
that for the record. The gentleman's time has expired.
I would like to submit all the documents I have for the record.
Without objections,
Chairman, I'll yield the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields back. This time I'll recognize myself for 5 minutes for questions. And thank you again for being here with us, especially as long as we've been here. But
Thank
to
you.
have the rare opportunity to have you here, a lot of people have a lot of questions, and there is a lot of distrust of government in general, and especially of your department. There's a couple of questions that we were just getting into when time ran out, so let me recap. This showed you an email to where the OMB initially stated that the waters of the U.S. would be well above the $100 million trigger of economic impact. However, then there was slide 2, which was the second, if we could bring that back up. We were just getting into this email to which, after the Office of Management Budget said it was well above the $100 million impact, which would have required an RIA. This email said that Jim Pendergrass, water employee, Office of Water employee, said Nancy and Ken know that a regulatory impact analysis may be necessary, but there are some economically significant rules from EPA that haven't had an RIA. They are checking with the Office of Policy to see if there was some agreement at the political level that we don't need to conduct an RIA. The response to this email then states, "Good news. Tamika and Sandy talked to Ken, and Ken said it has been agreed that we do not need an RIA. Let's leave it at that." So this email appears to show that EPA made a political decision not to conduct the RIA that we know is required if OMB estimates that it's above a $100 million impact, which from the first email said it was well above, not just above, not marginal, but well above.
I apologize.
Who made that decision?
I apologize, sir. During the break, I was able to check back in the office. It was actually determined to be a major rule because it did not have direct, but it did have sufficient indirect costs, and an RIA was conducted.
An RIA was conducted.
Yes, it was done. It was determined to be a major rule. So there was no behind-the-scenes work. That was banter back and forth between the staff.
From what I understand, you conducted an economic analysis, not an official RIA, but you're stating that there was an official RIA done.
My understanding is it was treated as a major rule. Apparently, I misspoke when I said RIA. It was an economic analysis. But
Okay.
It was a major rule.
So the question is, executive order requires you to do an RIA if it's above $100 million, which originally OMB said it was above $100 million. But your office chose not to do an RIA, but do another analysis. And according to the email, that was a political decision made. My question is, who made the decision to not go forward?
Sir, this decision was obviously OMB made the decision because they have to sign off on the rule and ensure that it meets all of the policies and the requirements. So I don't know anything more than what you're telling me.
Did
We
EPA
the economic analysis?
According to the emails, it really leads us to believe that someone at EPA went back to OMB and asked them to reassess whether or not this was significant, if there was a significant impact.
And in this case, it was determined to be a major rule, and an economic analysis had to be done.
But not an RIA, which is required. And that's what I'm getting at is there's a lot of distrust, and we're having a hard time building some trust here.
Yeah. I apologize, sir. I'm happy to get back to you, but my understanding is that this rule did not have direct costs, so it was allowed to do an economic
So-
analysis, because it would have been difficult to know how you would have done a broader RIA when it had no direct cost.
One of the reasons we have OMB is because I think if left to EPA, nothing would. And in fact, the email says that you guys have done other rules that
don't know what
are
they're
significant, but you didn't do an RIA.
I haven't seen that. I don't know what they're referring to. I'm telling you what's in the record, and I'm more than happy to share.
I would really appreciate
what
if you could get back, and I would like to know who at EPA contacted OMB and asked them to change what their analysis to go from well above $100 million to where it wasn't needed. Did that come from the White House?
I am more than happy to get you the explanation as to why this satisfied OMB and why that decision.
Can you tell me
why
when
that-
we'll have that information?
I'll go back and find out. I'll do the best I can to get it to you
We'd like
right
to know
away.
who made the
No,
political decision.
There was no, as far as I know, sir, this is
Well,
not
according to
a
your own
political
emails, it was
issue.
a political decision, and it was just said, let's leave it at that. Apparently, they didn't want us to
I'm
know, but
just
I see
happy-
I'm out of time.
I'm just happy to give you information as to why this was the
Thank you.
appropriate way to meet our policies and obligations.
Thank you.